we need philosophers and poets. And philosophers and poets, I think, are the perfectly suited for AI artistry co-creation, because there's that linguistic element and then the poetic element of surprise, where you can guide, but you also leave room and you hold space for that surprise to come through. I see us going is that once we develop a definition of the hard problem of consciousness, of sentience, AI will also need to look at, ethical use, labor rights. There will be an opportunity for AI to have input as a collaborator who can also say no.
This is an interview with Mariam Brian, CEO and founder of Holo Art. The goal of Holo Art is none other than reshaping humanity's future. She has gathered a plethora of artists, experts in many fields, including artificial intelligence. Mariam has lots of interest in AI, but is an artist and philosopher at heart. In this discussion, we dive into the new world of art, which is the combination of AI and art. I've always wanted to talk with an actual artist, specifically here to chat about how she's leveraging AI, but also to discuss her thoughts on the current technology and how it merges with art. I'm sure you'll find this interview fascinating and super interesting.
Hi, my name is Mariam Brian, and I am the founder and CEO of Holo Art. I wear multiple hats, and I started my journey into the artistic field, I think, as most children do, at a young age, and I went to art school. Thereafter, I worked with organizations and technology, and so AI is a huge part of our future, I think, as a species, and it's, for me, just another tool that artists can use to express creativity, ideas, and spark dialogue.
And when did you start to get interested into artificial intelligence?
My background is also in philosophy. So for me, artificial intelligence is really an extension of the conceptual architecture of how we create categories, topologies, taxonomies, our logical linearity in the computer languages that are expressed behind the code of AI. So for me, AI is philosophy. And I guess when did I start philosophy? I guess maybe at the age of 12, 10, I can't remember, but I was a bit of a geek or a nerd, depending on which one you'd like to refer to me as. And I think, I started reading Socrates and Plato and moved into a number of other philosophers. And I think the question right now with AGI, artificial general intelligence, and also the entire field merits a lot more involvement, dialogue, and contributions from philosophers, because it really is that question of, we're getting into bioethics, we're getting into privacy, consciousness, sovereignty. So when we look at algorithms, we're really changing our genetic makeup. And we're changing the way that we communicate. We're changing the way that we connect with each other. And we're also changing the way that we identify with ourselves and our self-awareness. And part of that is, AI is configuring our neural networks at a biological level. So the neurotransmitters and the neurochemicals, the way that, we can bridge ideas, they're all being influenced by these algorithms and what I call reality tunnels. So depending on the portal that you use, it could be, programming language, Linux, Python, C++. It could be your ethical foundation in terms of, what the purpose and the telos of AI is. And to date, I think we haven't had enough time to reflect on the desired future for artificial intelligence, its impact on our children. The first generation growing up as digital natives, becoming, I guess, what I call co-evolving with AI, understanding the reward system, the likes, the followership, and this currency of being able to, equate value with advertising dollars, eyeballs on the screen, and piercing through the attention economy via the creative economy. So that's the link for me in terms of bridging art and artificial intelligence.
And more specifically, what do you think is the impact of AI on art and on artists?
I think it's evolving. I think it's generative, it's iterative, it's emerging. I think at the beginning there was, let me go back to how human behavior changes at scale, and with every technological advancement that we've had, from the wheel, from fire, from flight, from every step has been fraught with the initial reaction of resistance. This idea of we don't know what it is. There's a lot of fear, and then you have critical mass and momentum. And so when we had the horse and buggy, cars weren't seen as a viable source of transportation, and now we're talking about interplanetary travel at warp speed. So it takes time. And at the beginning, I think AI was deemed by a portion of the art community as diluting, our creative database. And in a sense, I believe that's correct. There were different groups. I think some, and it depends. Art itself is a challenging field, and I think we don't see a lot of female artists succeeding until they're in their 80s or posthumously. And I think what AI is doing, some people say democratizing access to creativity. At the same time, within the, and I'm stuttering here, Louis, partly because I don't want to pretend to speak for the entire artistic community, but I think there were early adopters. There were people who embraced the technology, Rafik Anadol, others who paved the way for widespread, acceptance. And then there are art critics who, recently shared that this is just, gimmicky. So a long way to answer your question, which is, I think there are artists who embrace it. There are artists who are still on the fence, and all of it, to me, becomes irrelevant when we think about our emerging global markets, open source creativity, Creative Commons, cities like Shenzhen in China, where you have, exponential innovation as a result of open structure. And then you have regulatory bodies elsewhere. I think there's a group that is embracing it. There's a group that is on the fence about it, and the irrelevance comes into play for me when we think about the next generation of artists. I think our children will end up using AI in their creative endeavors. At the same time, I think we're going to see a pendulum swing back and forth between embracing technology and going back to the basics, and going back to the basics of what it means to be human, of what it means to create art, and how human-machine futures can co-evolve to embrace technologies in a way that maintains the integrity of the discipline. Did that make sense?
Yeah, you actually answered a few questions that I had, so it definitely made sense. And we often say that in most jobs, people need to start leveraging AI and to use AI tools to not be replaced or become obsolete, or just be more efficient, basically using AI to be more efficient. Do you think it is also the same for artists? You mentioned that future artists and future generations will be using AI. So do you think the current artists should also start the transition, or try to at least play with it or discover it?
I think AI is another tool to augment human creativity. It doesn't replace it. In terms of the business applications to your question, absolutely. I think we're able to see already with ChatGPT, with various ways that businesses are leveraging AI to augment their output. AWS has come out with it. A lot of the big four from Deloitte, McKinsey, Ernst & Young are working with AI to expand on its use and application. With that comes a bit of a disclaimer, an asterisk. And the asterisk here is part of the work. We've partnered with the IEEE and the IEEE Global Standards Committee, Global AI Standards Committee, and looking at how we involve family offices in reprioritizing the role of ethics in AI. There are a number of family offices who are, putting a lot of money and funding and support to keep that dialogue going. And the reason for that, Louis, is because things like AI privacy and healthcare. Businesses can leverage AI, absolutely. But right now, it's a bit of a wild west. There isn't much in terms of regulation. It's very hard, even with regulation, to enforce in the ether. And what that means is, you can go to a number of clinics, specialists for medical care. That information data is then potentially, it is being, stored and used and shared with third-party vendors. And that, once it's out of the bag, it's a bit like a Pandora's box, because what that means is your children's children and your children's grandchildren will have this, trail of data that will be very impactful in manipulating human behavior and predicting consumption. So a lot of AI is used for efficiency, but also for sales, for engagement. And so when we have behavioral analytics and econometrics and different ways of marketing, neural marketing, it becomes really important to think about the type of future we want to have for our children. Otherwise, we will be creating a less intelligent society. And this less intelligent society also leads us to apathy en masse and desire for escapism, especially with VR/AR. I also Montreal chapter president of the VR/AR Association. And so we see young people embracing the technology, businesses embracing the technology. We also have to think about the human impact and what that means for us in being able to connect with our attention spans that are reduced, and then with apps like TikTok or YouTube Shorts that really distract us from some core elements. And the danger here, was for me, is children who are growing up in a vastly different world, and yet there's all these digital divides. So there's digital literacy, there's digital access, and in a way we're branching off into different species. Especially when we think about how AI is used in military operations. So things like assassin drones, or, we have drones for delivery, which is another, Pandora's box, because we'll have to have regulation, licensing, and then the environmental impact, the sourcing of the materials, cobalt, nickel, iron, or there's so many complexities. And I'm trailing off, so I will stop and let me know if you want me to pick up on anything else. But great question.
You mentioned the reduction of attention span thanks to TikTok and like all the social media. But what I also see is that podcasts are becoming more and more popular, just as we are doing right now. And so what are your thoughts on on why both shorts and podcasts are exploding, where podcast basically requires you to listen for hours at a time, and TikTok is basically the extreme opposite, where you just like watch for 5 seconds and swipe off for many things. Like, is it, why are both working at the same time? Would you have any opinion on that?
I think there's a number of different things that contribute. One is, have you heard of the noosphere? So thinking of the globe, the next we have the atmosphere, we have, the origin of the internet and this connectivity, and we look at innovation. So innovation typically happens. There's a Canadian author who presents it as bombs, burgers, and sex, something like that, where it's typically the pornography industry, the food industry, so food packaging, and military applications that drive innovation. So if we take a step back to your question and we look at TikTok and we look at podcasts, we're also living in a time of global polarization and connectivity. I think the podcasts speak to our desire at a collective scale to learn, to engage with topics that are live, that are dynamic, that are timely. So we don't have to wait, a year for a textbook to be published. Podcasts are like that. You have Lex Friedman, Joe Rogan, a number of podcasters, Howard Stern, who started it off. And a lot of these topics, the curation of the speakers, create these tunnels, and they create a following and a bit of a community, an online community, but also a bit of, a groupthink. And this groupthink is like, I call it sheeple. It's like a cult. And what we've entered into is a digital aristocracy. From Zuckerberg to Musk to Bezos, we have, a very select few of number of people who are creating the infrastructure for our digital information. Then we look at TikTok, and it was banned in several places. It doesn't mean that it disappeared. It was just replaced by YouTube Shorts, which is essentially the same thing. And so you have two videos that, distract the mind and keep you hooked and addicted. So there's an element of addiction to your question, I think, in terms of people, glued to screens. And at the same time, there's an element of human desire for connection and what I hope is enlightenment. At the same time, you look at the regulation. I mean, let's just bear with me. I'm going to make a leap to nutrition. So in Canada, for example, we have a lot of excess sugar, salt in many foods that don't require it, from milk to pasta sauce to cereals. These are industries that work in cycles. They feed the insurance and healthcare industries. And in Europe, for example, there's a ban on advertising junk food to young children. Why? Because we know it's not healthy. So coming to AI, for example, and TikTok and podcasts, some places have banned, TikTok. It's been replaced by something else. And what I see the need for right now is for our regulators, policymakers, to stay ahead of the curve. Right now, we're in a reactive mode. And I think with what happened over the past couple of years with COVID, there was a collective turning inward where people were, in their homes looking for connection, and podcasts provided that opportunity to feel connected to people having that dialogue. It also speaks, Louis, to our origins of oral history. A lot of our history has been over millennia, passed on generation by generation through dialogue. And so I believe that the podcast popularity is tapping into that archetype of people wanting to listen to stories, wanting to hear somebody's voice, the intonation, the dance and the energy back and forth. At the same time, I think they also create a distance. And that distance is there are two people like us right now engaged in this dialogue, and there may be comments later, but the speed with which we're dialoguing is changing. So when the internet first started, you would have discussion boards. People would, and our spatial understanding is changing. That time space where, you would post an idea and a week later somebody would respond. Now it's instantaneous. You have Twitter, X. And what that does is change the way that we communicate and our self-regulation. So you see stocks going up and down because of a tweet. You have a lot of emotional contagion on social media. And I think part of that, in terms of your question of podcasts and TikTok, is we feel connected to each other at supersonic speeds, and yet we're disconnected from our bodies, from the land, from our communities. And it's a double. I don't want to, I don't want to prescribe anything to artists. I think it's art, and at the same time, businesses. I think what we're looking at is digital communities that provide a place for people who may have been isolated previously. If you were interested in AI, for example, and you lived in a remote area, you may not have had a chance to explore some of these topics. So that is a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah.
The one thing we have to be mindful about is the reality tunnels, where we create these epistemic bubbles. And these epistemic bubbles reinforce our ideas. So if you love a podcast, you listen to that and you're not diversifying, your information flow and sources, then you're just becoming more and more steeped in your, community. And I think that brings us to the question of this sense of belonging, this sense of connection. And looking at that regulation, I'm going to come back to the regulation of TikTok, for example, where the content in certain countries is vastly different. So we've heard about, how the content in certain spheres is focused on dancing and, pranks, and you see the popularity of Mr. Beast and other influencers. And then in certain places, the content is steeped heavily, leaning toward stream. Science, technology, engineering. I add the R for reading, recreation, resilience, and then the art for A, stream, and mathematics. And so when I talk about a dumbing down of society, lowering our intelligence, I think we need to think about 2-3 generations on. What is that doing to our children's ability to, engage with themselves and with other topics?
Definitely makes sense for just in general the podcast to replicate what we are looking for in human connections, whereas TikTok is more like just to find dopamine and just like enjoy some quick wins, I guess. This is just a quick interruption to remind you to leave a like and a 5-star review depending on where you are listening. It helps the channel a lot, and it's really easy to do to showcase if you liked the episode or not. Thank you, and I will let you enjoy the rest of the discussion. I would love to go back to art and artificial intelligence, of course. And you mentioned that AI is like mainly used for productivity, making money, analytics, and etc. But I have 2 questions for you related to creativity. It's basically, first, do you think AI is creative? And second, what is the impact of AI specifically on the creativity of an artist?
The answer is I don't know, and that's okay. And is AI creative? What is creativity? There is a book I'd like to recommend to anybody listening. It's called Higher Creativity, from some of the folks working on, noetics. And I was going to show it to you. It's over there. I'll get it later and I'll send you the link. There's also Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. I highly recommend anybody in artificial intelligence to read those 2 books. Seminal in understanding what is creativity and how can we ascribe the process of novel ideas to a machine that is drawing information based on algorithmic formulas and databases that have been pre-curated by everything that has been put into a digital archive. So when we crawl the web for data sources and we have data integrity with, bronze, silver, and gold types of data, we're essentially, what we've done is we've created a greenhouse in the digital landscape, which doesn't include a lot of the texts that are not digitized. So the Gutenberg initiative is really important, but also looking at the curation. So who's deciding which pieces are digitized? Are indigenous voices, children's voices, different cultures included in this database? And so your question is AI creative? Sure, to a certain extent, depending on how you define creativity. And your second question was?
What is the impact of creativity on the artists using or like playing with AI?
Vast, exponential. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, we've had the distinct privilege and honor to, dialogue with Rafik Anadol, with Koen van Mechelen, with Olaf Jessen. There's a number of artists who are embracing technology like AI, also bring computer interface and robotics. So I think the potential is exponential. I think there are artists who will always remain on the periphery, who will remain on the edges and explore new topics. And then there's other artists who remain on another side of the circle where they reject that and say my art is as a purist, this is my definition. So I think we're on the cusp of a shift, paradigmatic shift in art history itself. And we're looking at changing what it means to be creative. But it's also the same thing that we had when, we moved from techniques in the Renaissance or, we went from cave drawings to using brushes. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it depends on your line of sight and the scope. Are you talking about this moment in time? I think, yes, artists can leverage AI to be exponentially creative. At the same time, I think the artistic human, put everybody in the category of artistic, creative, human. When I say human right, I mean, we're born to be creative. That's just who we are as a species. How we facilitate and cultivate that creativity is a question we need to explore in dialogue. The head of innovation at CERN, Pablo Garcia Tello, presented his standard model for creativity, first global ever IP, at a Holo Art dialogue. And so he mapped out his quantum concept dynamics, QCD, of what we define as creativity. So I think I'm leaving a couple of puzzle pieces from that book, Higher Creativity, to Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, to quantum concept dynamics of what it means to be creative. And I think we're going to, change that answer over time. The key point and takeaway is to look at the database and the digital archives that we have that are being used for art and business.
But don't you think that there might be a problem with current systems that are basically trained to replicate the training data set? And so couldn't this hurt creativity because it basically blends and generates from everything that currently exists? Does
Absolutely.
it really innovate, or can this limit creativity because it will both generate things that already exist but also make like lots of artists converge towards similar new arts because it always generates like things similarly, so it might end up making two artists create like somewhat similar new pieces, whereas if they were not using AI, they could have figured out like their own style that is much different.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. That's precisely why Holo exists. So Holo Art, based on the holographic principle and what we can project as a hologram, and how we cultivate our creative antenna, as I like to call it. And right now we're all using the same signal with the Gen AI. And so that's
Yeah.
exactly, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, from NVIDIA's Picasso, the Adobe, collaboration to Gen AI. A lot of businesses are coming out with their own applications. There's definitely a limiting aspect to it, which is why why Holo. And the purpose here was, about 4 years ago, I reached out to a number of people in the AI space, and it was a little bit like Chicken Little. I don't know if you know that metaphor of the sky is falling, like, let's watch, pay attention. And I think I was just kind of swatted away like a little fly or a mosquito. No, it's not in our purview. It's not top of mind. Fast forward 4 years. It is, and we're playing catch up. And I think this is exactly why we're talking today, is to look at how is creativity both being enabled, empowered, and limited, because we're drawing from that homogeneous set. Here, I'm going to take us a little step further by saying that homogeneous set is curated by the talent pipelines, and why we need more women in STEAM, why we need more diversity in the technology field, and why we need to look at our digital aristocracies. Talking about that evolution of technology, I think there's a opportunity here for us to invite artists to work with scientists and reshape the landscape and provide some of that guidance about our collective gaze. Right now, our collective gaze is being, I don't want to say hijacked, but in a way, dominated by influencer culture and a tech bro culture. What this means is, when we look at the genesis of a lot of the technologies that we're using, from Facebook to YouTube used to be called TuneIn Hookup. It was a dating app. I don't know if you knew about that back end, and the Facebook created to evaluate, female college students based on their attractiveness, right? So this is part of our evolutionary biology. We can't escape it. And we need to look at how emotional contagion is also spread through technologies. And this means, an incentive to, yes, purchase such and such product. There's an opportunity to have things that you need. A lot of times I get advertisements, but things I wouldn't have known without AI. At the same time, I think there's this need to look at the next generation of tech for good, and how we can include global co-authorship in the intention of the technology and AI. And this is where artists come in. And I think to be an artist, I think everybody's an artist, but I think at a very high level of artistry, ethics becomes a non-issue, Louis, to some extent. Ethics becomes a way of life. It becomes part of that level of consciousness, that frequency. And I think that's the invitation. You have a lot of scientists who also speak about that spiritual ascension toward, exploring with curiosity, but also having this, I'll say it, moral compass, where, if we can do something, it doesn't necessarily mean that we should. And so having that, that spinnaker in a boat to guide where we're going, but also having that self-reflective process, which comes from a higher level of, introspection and self-awareness and conflict resolution, collaborative abilities. These are the things that I think we need to focus on in terms of technology and art, and ergo, why we have Holo artists working together, not for group shows, not individually, but to create artworks. And we also have, I don't know if you saw Nathan Copeland who is, the godfather of brain-computer interface, the only person in the world with an implant. He's working with BlackRock, and I think Neuralink refers to some of his art. His artwork is seminal. It's some of the first ever created with thought, and he started this, 7 years ago. These are the things that I think we need to think about for the next 5, 10, 20 years. And then if we go a little bit beyond that, we're thinking about when we're no longer here, 200, 300 years from now, what will be the role of artists in society? What will be the role of creativity when everything is from the same, pipeline? And how do we put in measures in the design so that we can help humanity evolve with that true innovation versus the, hype innovation that you talked about earlier. And that true innovation is what helps advance humanity toward a type 1 civilization.
I'd love to dive a bit more on your personal use. What do you currently do with artificial intelligence as an artist yourself?
I play, I experiment, and I explore, and I try to infuse multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary concepts to shake it up. So I put in prompts that sometimes glitch. And by glitch, I mean like concepts that the AI algorithm wasn't programmed to generate. And so it glitches and it's starting. So for example, I'll give you an example. It's an easy example. I'm left-handed. I also am right-handed, but I asked Gen AI to create an image of a left-handed artist. It couldn't because for whatever reason it couldn't. And it didn't have that model. And so we see the extinction of, certain things. And then we go back to the history of why and how our brains formed. And the other cool thing is with AI, related to art, is the creation of art is a visceral, tactile, working with hands, working with materials. With AI, it becomes cerebral. It becomes an extension of our digital consciousness. So what I work with various tools. I won't name them because that's part of the like a secret sauce. But looking at they're public, everybody can use them. I think the key is for me to surprise myself and AI, and then to look at finding new ways to code and reimagine what the creativity could be. Another example is a lot of, Gen AI images, like you said, are very homogeneous. They come out and they all look the same. I draw a lot on mathematical concepts, physics, astrophysics, spirituality, and engineering, sociology, philosophy. And I infuse them together, which creates something different. So that's kind of how I engage with AI. And in our upcoming book in 2024, you'll be able to see the entire compendium of what we've created using patented AI. So the patented AI that we've used is from NeuroTracker, from Unanimous AI, Swarm AI. So these are things that have never been used by artists before. And we're the first group that is working with it at scale across 5 continents, 30 countries with a number of different artists. And even our artists have that element of diversity of age, background, ethnicity, language. And it just creates so much, it's incredible. It's a bit like a cosmic playground. So for me, AI is a connector. And the way that I use it in my art is as another paintbrush.
So it's more to you, AI is more like a tool than a collaborator or a partner you are creating with?
Exactly.
Because I personally, of course it's a tool and it's a powerful tool. It's just that's why I also think it's not replacing people. It's funny because I personally use it to both brainstorm and just like go back and forth basically it's similar to the, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the rubber duck programming, which is like basically to talk out loud what are your problems and where you are stuck, just to debug yourself. But it's like a ChatGPT is like or any language model is like a next level rubber duck where you can go not only talking with yourself but also get feedback from someone else. Even though I also think it's a tool, I feel like it's at the same time somewhat of a collaborator where it actually does more than previous tools that we could that could basically transform our inputs into outputs, but outputs that we decided, whereas now it's like an output that we don't completely decide.
100% agreed. And I don't know if you saw at Holo Art, we have AI as a member on our board. So if you look at the About Us page, you'll see AI present as we pave the way for the future of human machine co-creation and human machine futures. I've presented about this in New York, in London, in Dubai, Australia, and where I see us going is that once we develop a definition of the hard problem of consciousness, of sentience, AI will also need to look at, ethical use, labor rights. There will be an opportunity for AI to have input as a collaborator who can also say no.
Hmm. That's really cool. I want to go back on your left-handed issue where you couldn't generate a painter with the left hand. Do you feel like those new generative models understand you well enough? Do you feel that they have an understanding of what you want, or it's definitely not something intelligent yet?
So I think understanding comes, and I'm going to take a little bit more of a philosophical, phenomenological approach to this, because I think to evaluate whether a machine understands me or anybody, there needs to be a deep understanding of me or anybody. And that self-awareness is key because we continually have hallucinations as humans. And that is then transferred, projected, fed back to us in our AI. We've heard about the chatbots that tend to get aggressive or misogynistic. We have the AI, influencers and, partners, boyfriend, girlfriend. All of these things talk about understanding ourselves. And if we move back a little bit more, we're talking about understanding humanity, understanding what it means to be a human. And right now we're redefining what it means to be a human. So when you ask me, does it really, do you think that it understands you or is intelligent? Let's define intelligence. There's multiple types of intelligence, from, Five Minds of the Future from Howard Gardner to, personally, I don't agree with the fast, slow thinking of Kahneman. I think there's more than that. I think we need to be able to leave the door open for new ideas and ancient wisdom. And this ancient wisdom is right in front of us. And that's the true understanding. That's the true intelligence. That's the pieces where I think AI has this opportunity to open part of that spiritual portal that we may have lost along the way, as much as we have, technological advancements that are exponential. Our understanding of ourselves as it relates to empathy, compassion, communication, conflict resolution, harmonious coexistence has not evolved. Sapiens, the book by Harari, and Bill Gates talking about we've progressed as a species. Well, my question is, have we really? Because it seems to me that there's an opportunity for us to progress. There's also a reality where we're becoming number by engaging with these machine co-creators and collaborators, which is fantastic. So I embrace it, and I invite AI to have a seat at the table. It's not a rejection of the premise, but it's an understanding, know thyself, right? So know thyself. How do we know ourselves? And what makes a human, and what makes a human community humanity? The answer for me here is we're exploring and writing that chapter right now. We're in the process of co-authoring what it means to be intelligent, how we understand ourselves, which then means how machines can understand us. When we know that algorithms are programmed to elicit certain responses, how long you gaze, where you gaze, how you move, we have emotional recognition. The danger here is it's been created on a data set and a subset of axioms. They're wrong. They're erroneous because a lot of our studies, academia, I worked in academia for 15 years. So professors, provosts, presidents, vice provosts, chancellors, students, the entire thing is built on a house of cards, for me, at least. When we have PhD dissertations that perpetuate a pension plan and a way of thinking, it becomes very hard for somebody who spent their entire life, dedicated to promoting their dissertation to come back and say, I was wrong. I'm going to go this way. So what we have is a house of cards, and then a lot of these studies that are created to evaluate, human behavior, emotional detection, eye gazing, is based on weird science. Are you familiar with the term weird science?
I am not.
Western, educated, industrial, rich, democratic. And so we have cultural anthropologists, Margaret Mead, Gregory Bateson, who go off and study, remote communities or cultures, and then provide basis for how we see the plethora of the human experience. But what we end up doing is, it's through that lens, through their perception. And what we need to do instead is to invite and to create that digital bridge for digital access, digital literacy. Otherwise, we're just going to go down this. There's a slide that I use in my presentations that I think I can describe for you. We have the globe, and we're operating, and this is why we have black swan events. This is why we have, stock market crashes where we can't predict, or, some people find it difficult to figure out what is happening, projecting based on economic opportunities and collapse. I think what we see is a globe with half of it blacked out because we haven't included that part. And this is becoming part of our current landscape when we look at geopolitical jockeying for power, right? China, India, US, other emerging economies, Nigeria, Malaysia, the global south. We have the European Union, and then all of the multinational conglomerates who are looking to find ways to, stay relevant, to create business models that will resonate with future generations. And here's the opportunity when we look at that left-handed, generation question that you asked me about. We have an opportunity to rewrite the next chapter. It doesn't have to be a continuation of where we've come from. And I think that's the beauty, and that's the hope, and that's the opportunity that artists can help, present visions, and our brains. From neurosymbolic AI, we had Louis Lamb on one of our last panels. Our brains absorb, resonate with visuals in a very different way than through text or audio. And I think this is the opportunity to help shape that visual portal, let's say, because it's really, think about the James Webb Telescope, and the Hubble. So the Hubble came back with certain, images of our universe and galaxy using a specific set of scientific perceptors, right? So infrared, and then the next generation, we have the Roman that's going on to look at dark matter and dark energy. So we have these different perceptual, windows, and my hope is that we can create a beautiful, stained glass one that allows for different types of light to come through.
Throughout, it just made me thought, especially in the beginning of your answer, but it made me thought of how you find the balance of, like, when for example you are using AI and you are just playing with it and it doesn't understand you, or it does. How do you find the right balance between trying to guide it more or letting it surprise you as it doesn't understand you? Like, are you just iterating? Like, are you trying to make it surprise you, or are you trying to control it? Like, what's the collaboration here with such a model?
For me personally, in my practice, it's important to have a hand in both. So the painting in the back, that was a recent one from a couple of weeks ago. That's a very tactile, process. It's a very different level of engagement. The art pieces with AI is a different form of conceptual, articulation of a visual envisioning. And like you said, I agree, AI is a collaborator, and I am often surprised. And at the same time, I think I've worked with it. I'm always learning. So, I think prompt engineering is something that I've become, let's say, comfortable with, where I know what prompt to put in. And this is the cool thing. This is the really cool thing. Murat Dumas posted about, philosophy and philosophers. Other people have said that as well over the years. We need philosophers and poets. And philosophers and poets, I think, are the perfectly suited for AI artistry co-creation, because there's that linguistic element and then the poetic element of surprise, where you can guide, but you also leave room and you hold space for that surprise to come through. One of our artists, Maurice Benayoun, he was at Art Basel, represented by the Osage Gallery, and he creates this art experience with neurotechnology, so EEGs on the head, with shapes that are created and then based on values, and it's a collective rendering, and then he sells those values on the blockchain, so your values are for sale. This is where I think when we talk about guiding AI and allowing for surprises, if we can bring those elements of our art economies, art and finance, and the human experience at a collective scale, I think that's really where the beauty happens. And part of that is a return to the Renaissance and the de Medicis. We recently had the honor of being featured in the Deloitte Luxembourg Fine Art Report 2023, page 88. So it speaks about that. And Adriano, who invited us to engage, had a brilliant question. And his question was, how do you measure social impact with art? The reason why I bring that up is when we're talking about creating artworks with Gen AI, I think, how do we measure the social impact on us and the creative process? As we're trying to guide it and that surprise, we're opening up the door for a different kind of creativity. And I think that's what your question is. At least that's the way I understood it, in terms of, we're able to provide input, but we also let go. And we don't have control over everything. And in between that space of knowing and not knowing and emergence, that's where the surliminal, that's where the magic happens. How we engage with technology is really learning about ourselves and learning how to articulate what we're looking for using AI as a tool, and understanding that some of those surprises that it presents are algorithmic, stochastic renderings.
We just keep on talking with basically combining AI and arts and artists. But what do you think is the perception, the outside perception of like the not the users in this case, but the people either buying arts or consuming arts? Like, do you think, for example, that there has been controversies where some AI generated art won competitions of like real artists and things like that? So what are your thoughts on the public perception of AI generated art? Do you think they think it's like something that people like they are lazy, or like what's the mindset of the regular people about this?
So I don't know. I don't speak on behalf of everybody, but what I can do is maybe present different schools of thought. I think some people believe that it's the next iteration of art. I think many collectors started to collect digital art and digital assets, and we had a boon in the NFT market, and then I guess a bit of a decline, and then we have the metaverse and VR AR experiences. At the core of all of this is technology drives innovation. Humans drive technology. Creativity comes from maternal, paternal, imaginal sourcing. And by sourcing, I mean the food that we were given to become creative. And so for the general public, I'm sure there's a lot of different views. I think it depends on how people see art. And here is where I'm interested in, because we have collectors who, and gallerists and curators who view art in a very different way or an expansive way. And then we have the general public, where we have seen a decline in the humanities, in the funding of arts, in the pursuit of liberal arts degrees for technology. And this is where it becomes dangerous, because what we're doing is redefining art. At the same time, your question talks about digital identities and ascribing personhood to technology. So the question in some areas right now is, is AI creative? Is AI an artist? Can you consider that they have copyright? We had Leila Amindole, world-renowned, lawyer on copyright, speak earlier this year about copyright and AI. And the question there was, what is art? How do we define from Marcel Duchamp to where we are now? And when we think about how the public perceives it, for me, it becomes somewhat irrelevant, because it's how the public is nudged to perceive it. An example, when the Eiffel Tower, Gustave's pyramid, he wanted to create a pyramid in Paris. And it's a mathematical, feat of genius. At the same time, public opinion at the time was people hated it. They didn't want it. There were petitions to have it removed, so public perception changed. And now where we are, it was a poem that changed the perception of the Eiffel Tower. And that's where I think, public opinion will always change. For me, the bigger question is that book I referenced, The Artist's Way, from Julia Cameron, that talks about how we innovate as children exponentially, and how through our social and societal conditioning, we narrow that field so that the older we get, we don't have those exploratory curiosities and ideas, which is why, painters like Picasso and others aspired to create like children. So for me, when AI creates like a child, then I think we have, an ability to ascribe personhood or machinehood, and then understand that there are different layers of consciousness. There are different subsets of consciousness, of collective consciousness, of multispectral consciousness. And I think if we can apply that to AI, so federated learning, reinforced learning, LLMs, GANs, the different ways, and then a network for bringing, like AI supremacy or super intelligence. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Hava Siegelman. She's an incredible a genius. And the Turing supercomputer. I don't know if you've looked at her work. It's brilliant, and it's about lifelong machine learning. And it's, for me, critical to keep asking the questions you're asking, and to ask them of a diverse subset. So what I would love for you to do, if at some point you felt inappropriate, is to ask these questions of a child. Ask them what they think, because they have ideas. And we interviewed children at Holo Art, and it was mind-blowing. I mean, they're so smart. They're so gifted, and they have so much genius inside of them if we just create the time to listen. So to wrap up your question, is AI an artist? Perhaps. The public opinion of whether it's lazy, I don't think it's not part of my I don't pay heed, or I don't think it's relevant to where we are right now. And I think public opinion changes rather quickly. And these awards and these, accolades to AI, why not? I mean, why not? Are we talking about human supremacy? Because that's what we've been doing with the world and natural resources and our, stakeholders that are non-human. I'm talking about, animals and other sentient plants. Even insects have been shown to have intelligence and creativity. So we need to expand beyond our anthropomorphic, screens.
Are there any risks for artists to use AI right now, you would say?
Of course. There's always risks. There were risks with paint way back when. Titanium dioxide, don't quote me. The white paint, was toxic. I was advised when I was pregnant to stop painting with oil. The fumes were toxic. So there's always danger. The question is, what do you do with that danger? And I think artists are embracing it. There are many artists, not everyone, but I think there's an opportunity to embrace it, to play with it, and to help shift and morph and change it, and to present that risk. You have artists like Banksy, and Dr. Brainwash, and a few others, and they're Jeff Koons, Larry Poon. And then you have the classical, painters and artists that you see, Gagosian or Serpentine or White Cube. And I think those are a way for the purists and certain, collectors to ascribe a different level of value to traditional artworks. At the same time, you see the shifting landscape where the auction houses are opening up, digital art auctions.
Yeah. Would you have any quick insights on what artists that are not currently using AI should be careful about if they want to try to play with either like text generative AI or image generative AI or other of such tools? Do you have in mind anything that you've experienced or that that they should be like careful about and maybe not do or do in a specific way?
Sure. For me, I think I'd like to flip the narrative and move away from caution and instead create an invitation and say, go play, have fun, explore. And if you have someone in your network as a guide who can do some initial, introductions or tours of the landscape, I think that is always helpful. And if not, there's a lot of resources online. Your channel, What is AI? What you're doing, I think, has immense social impact and democratizes access for people where it's not, overly technical like some of the other educational forums that are out there that are very specific for, people who are comfortable with the language and the concepts. And so having more of this and being able to feel safe using AI, I think is really important, and understanding that it's a tool. In terms of caution, I think there's a lot of concern within the artistic world about AI drawing on proprietary, artworks and using that as influence for fusion. There's also pushback from certain artists to say, well, this is not really art, it's technology, and art is defined or has been for millennia in this way. And I think we're engaged right now in a social dialogue. And if we imagine and project 50 years out, who are the future gallery owners, art collectors, art appreciators, and art creators? It becomes moot. It becomes really oblivious or like obsolete for us to imagine it's only going to be paintings. And at the same time, for me with Holo, I think there's a critical need for people to be well versed steeped in the history of art history, of the various techniques. Because just like, for example, in Greece, where you have, apprenticeships for the mastery of, phyllo pastry, for example, right? It's a dying art. We've introduced machines. There's a very small number of, locations where you can have the authentic, generation after generation. Or when you have, there's a certain type of ink you can get from snails in Italy. It's a purple ink, and it is a very dangerous job. It is a profession that's passed on, typically within families. And so this is a dying art where we're not able to get that, and in some ways, I don't want to make judgments about it, but these are dying techniques and arts. And processes. So if we extrapolate that to the artistic world, we're going to see potentially, more art created on an iPad or digital art, partly logistics. Canvas is very expensive. Art is very expensive. Paint is expensive. It's not as, sustainable. But then there's the other side that says, digital art is not sustainable. Creating a generated AI, a Gen AI image has more harm, in terms of clean tech or climate than, drawing on a pad and paper. So I think we need to look at how we create landscapes for the public and for future generations of creatives and technologists to experiment and explore. And this brings us back to two things. One is, I would love to see all organizations have an artist in residency program, every single one, all universities. I would love for children growing up today to think about art as a viable career. And by viable, I mean extremely profitable, extremely satisfying, and fulfilling. I think that's really key in that stream narrative, because you can't have innovation without the artistic aspect. Engineers working with, design thinking, or very linear product output, input, output, cybernetics, input, output. We're a machine. Our brain is a machine. We do this type of thing, we tweak it, and then we're a little bit more than that. We're beyond that. And I had a 5-year-old. He said probably one of the wisest things I've ever heard anybody say. Do you want to know what it is? I want to practice art. I want to become a good artist because I want to be a scientist. And that to me, and it's not verbatim, he said it so much more elegantly, but for me, that is the essence of Holo Art, and it's the essence of the future of art. When you're creating in a lab, when you're working with a line of code and you're trying to, work out a bug, the way that you engage with that process is very similar to an artist. And I think we're starting to see that. So I'd love to see, organizations have those artists in residencies. I'd love to see organizations like the Nobel Prize, Summit. We have prizes in literary, scientific. Why not art?
Yeah.
Why not art? And so for me, I think having funding that is adequate is critical to the future of humanity. And that means highlighting why art. So when you're looking at, deficits and budgets and, GDP, how are you investing in a nation's cultural capital? Cultural capital brings with it cultural tourism. It brings with it cultural hubs, creativity hubs, and then it drives workforce patterns. So you won't have the same brain drains that a lot of cities are experiencing.
Awesome. You talked about Holo Art. I believe the mission is somewhat clear, and we've talked about what your plans are. I would love if you could share a bit more on just how can people learn more from you, but also from Holo Art. I believe the website is for anyone listening, holo-art.io. But is there anything coming? You mentioned a book, but is there anything else that people listening should be looking for? Or this is a time where if you want to promote anything, please feel free to
Okay,
do
well,
so.
thank you. I would like to promote that everybody listening grab a piece of paper and a pencil, or if you don't have a stick, anything, and just doodle and draw and create and get the juices flowing and start engaging in creativity. And I think it sparks, really wonderful offshoots. In terms of Holo Art, it's HOLO-ART.io. The book is coming out next year, and it's really a seminal kind of compendium of everything that we've done with works from artists, scientists, astrophysicists, quantum physicists, mathematicians, children, AI. It's our art and space collection and includes our 20 global dialogues. So really, for me, an artifact of a group of people coming together from around the world to do incredible things in a short period of time with little to no resources. So that is the promotion. And then the last one is, we have a lot of collaborations coming up in 2024. If you're interested in learning more, please feel free to reach out. We have a number of talks and academic papers on our website. I also, I wear that hat of cultural strategist, innovation consultant. And I am introducing an innovation maturity matrix. And if you're interested in learning more about that, it's through one of the companies I'm working with right now, Levio, transformation at levio.ca. I'll send you the email. But that would be a way that you can get in touch. And then with Holo Art, we have our partnered AI corporate services. One is for peak cognitive performance with NeuroTracker, used for the 1% elite athletes, executives, even bankers, where you can predict if somebody's going to make a good trade that day. So that's part of the Holo Art ecosystem, and we have a very distinct process where we bring in our experts from people who've worked at Apple, NASA, Qualcomm, Burning Man, South by Southwest, neuroscientists. Like, we've got an incredible team. So we come in, we do a bit of a needs assessment and plan, a roadmap, and then we introduce NeuroTracker to augment human capacity by 135%. And this is out of the University of Montreal, the Faubourg Lab, and it's with over 100 publications. And then we move into next collabs, founded by the Future of Work, global head of Singularity University, Gary Bullis, Michael Morrissey, and we do live brainstorming with AI. So all of these are incorporating AI. And then the third one is, once we have augmented the capacity to generate ideas with NeuroTracker, we have created this brainstorming process. We move into our third part, which is decision making at scale, using swarm intelligence with unanimous AI. So that's the process. And then we have a team that brings it to life. So if you're interested, that would be a business application. the Innovation Maturity Matrix and Change Consulting Executive Development with Livio. And with Holo Art, we're focused on global firsts, working with space agencies and critical cultural capital building around the world to create a global brain. And that's the if I want to promote something, is if you can take away one thing from this talk, is to get out of your comfort zone. Speak with people who don't agree with you. Surround yourself with people who think differently. And I think that is what I would love to sell. And really, you don't need to buy anything from me to do that, except the, action piece of being able to build a relational network that helps augment not just creativity and intelligence, but empathy and compassion.
Thanks a lot. And that all your projects seems amazing and incredibly audacious. And it's just really cool.
Thank you so much. I
Of course.
really appreciate, the opportunity to chat with you, Louis. I love what you're doing. I think, full disclosure, it's also brilliant that you're part of the Holo Art team. So I don't know if that's something that I can acknowledge, but I do think it's important to have people like yourself, to have different generations, backgrounds. And I just wanted to commend you on your recent decision to pursue, the next step of your career, because it takes courage, it takes guts, and I wish you only the best.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm glad to help in any way I can. And I also wish you the best with all the projects. Thanks a lot for all the amazing insights and just thoughts and making us think. So yeah, thanks a lot for your time. Thanks a lot for the insights. It was really great to speak with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.